Hey everyone, welcome back to the Global Resilience Summit. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host for this interview with Sara Schley. Sara is an international business consultant, speaker, and co-founder of the regenerative sustainability consultancy Seed Systems. She's also an author who's led organizational transformations at renowned companies around the world. She's a mother, grandmother, community leader, and has been married for 26 years. She also has a bipolar II brain on the bipolar spectrum. Sara has kept this mostly a secret for 4 decades until now, and she's choosing to tell her riveting story from broken to blessed to save lives, end the stigma, and optimize healing for millions of people. Sara lives in the hill towns of Western Massachusetts with her husband, her loyal lab, and a steady flow of friends and family. And she is the author of the recently released Brainstorm from Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. Sara, I'm so thrilled you're here with us today.
Thank you so much, April. What a wonderful introduction.
I think we're going to be talking about quite a few things of deep interest and insight for this audience today. But today we're really focused. Day 4 of the summit is focused on climate change and climate resilience. So maybe we'll start there with just some of the work that you've done in Seed Systems, the consultancy that you co-founded. You've been coaching individuals, consulting with organizations, convening retreats, all in support of healing individual trauma and collective trauma, helping us shift to more regenerative and sustainable mindsets and heart sets. Can you just tell us a little bit about that work and the journey and just how you came to do that work?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. Well, thinking about it, where do you start the story? But for me, professionally with Seed Systems and organizations, I would go back to all the way back to 1993. I was working at MIT, a think tank with folks connected to Peter Senge and systems thinking in that movement. And I had the opportunity kind of right out of grad school to work with Shell Oil in a pretty deep way. And we were working on systems thinking and vision and this kind of stuff. And it seemed to be very effective. And then I woke up with this psychic dissonance one morning, like, oh my God, like if I'm helping those guys be more effective, I'm accelerating, the destruction of the planet and fossil fuel extraction. And I had grown up and, been out in the woods and love being outdoors. And it's probably a spiritual practice we'll get into, but it really struck me hard, so how am I going to do this stuff with corporations and still honor the planet? And so this is like way back before people really had the word sustainability and even climate change or even carbon footprint. It wasn't in the lexicon. And I talked to Mr. Senge and I said, could we do a consortium of corporations that were focused on sustainable business? And that's sort of how that all started. A funny story, the first meeting we had in a back room at MIT, somebody showed up and he says, oh, sustaining, you mean sustaining profits, right? So,
Wow.
The idea of sustainability wasn't even a thing. But that's how it started. And so it was, I think for many, many years for me, it was sort of always this kind of dissonance that probably a lot of folks listening can appreciate. Like, do I work from the inside, Shell Oil, Nike, British Petroleum, World Bank, and try to make change there where you can have massive leverage, perhaps, if you make a small change? Or is that just contributing to the problem?
Yeah.
I went back and forth on that for a lot of years.
Well, and kudos to you for one, recognizing the dissonance there, and then 2, taking an active role and thinking about how, you might craft your work and what you might do differently to bring that into alignment. I think that's incredible. When we think about, I mentioned we're going to go in a couple of different directions today because I think they're really important. When we think about your history and your work as a teacher, as a coach, as a consultant, you've been supporting both individuals. You've also been supporting and guiding larger organizations in these approaches to resilience and sustainability and climate change adaptation. I mentioned in your intro that you have an experience with bipolar II. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that has impacted your work?
Yeah, thank you, April. And as you mentioned in the introduction, 4 decades of wrestling with this particular brain. I'm a little older than that, but 4 decades ago we discovered it. And really, I've only fully come out of the closet, so to speak, in terms of telling my full story this year, 4 decades in.
Wow.
So I haven't. it's been something that I've been aware of, that because of, wrestling with my own personal mental health for all these years, that gave me a passion for, a credibility with, a whole set of experiences to help people deal with their own resilience when it comes to their brain, no matter what kind of brain they have. Mm-hmm. So, and I think I'm not sure where this came from exactly, but it's interesting that your summit, which I understand went from personal resilience, corporate resilience, maybe community resilience, global resilience. And I think about that as concentric circles from the inside out. Mm. That's always been my work. My work has always been about, leading sustainability from the inside out, or personal transformation from the inside out, or, corporate from the inside out. I always felt that we had to be in integrity with the type of leader that we were before we could change our organization accordingly. So, I think many people in my field that have that sort of mindset, leadership coaching made a lot of sense. If I'm working with Eileen Fisher, the corporation, I'm working with Eileen Fisher, the person. Thank you, Eileen, because she understood that made sense, that we had to be in integrity from the inside out.
That's so good. And it's an important thing to keep in mind, I think, especially with some of these more systemic problems, these larger scale, global, societal challenges. We forget that ultimately it's going to be a set of human beings who are going to have to make the change. And the set of human beings who are tackling that problem, they need to be as supported and resilient as possible before they're going to be able to make the change that they want to make. We forget that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't remember the quote exactly, but it was one of my colleagues and friends who talked about, if we are here out of balance, we may be doing violence, unintentionally, right? If we're here in balance, hopefully then we can contribute to healing. That's so good.
So, yeah.
Let's focus on some of those broader challenges. Climate change, certainly one of the broader systemic challenges that we face, global challenges that we face. But, as we record this, there is still the war in Ukraine has been going for a few weeks now and has been continuously changing. And the news that we hear is just so painful and difficult to see. And we've got, issues with COVID-19 and all of that still happening. I mean, we are facing some truly large scale issues. And when you think about how we can support individuals who are facing those challenges with just the emotions that come with it and the difficulty just even understanding and accepting the scale and scope of those challenges. How do we do that? How do we support people as they face challenges that feel so big, like climate change and others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of us are getting pummeled right now, right? I mean, I'm no different than you or anyone else. And this morning, I knew we were going to be talking, and I was just feeling out of balance. Not about our conversation, but just I don't know. I got bit by a tick yesterday. I just, I had to take some antibiotics. Was that it? I had slept in, whatever. I just was feeling off balance. But I think at this stage of the game, for me, it's like, okay, tune into that. So it's always first about the body, like physically, sensations. What am I noticing? And this gets into a whole other program that my partner and husband, Joe, and I used to do about primary colors of emotion, emotional resilience. And those primary colors being mad, sad, glad, and scared, and how those all attach to sensations in the body. Each of us is different. We do a kind of a brief visualization on that so we can learn our own system, right? Our own intrapersonal system. I've been practicing that enough so I can sense when, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit shaky, or my neck is stiff, or I just, I'm noticing just being off balance, right? So what do? I get outside. I'm lucky. I live in the woods, but I chose to live in the woods because of my bipolar brain, because I learned that I had to have forest therapy, to keep myself sane. So that's just one example, I think we have to pay attention to what's going on internally, physically, emotionally, and then that's going to impact what we can do effectively, intellectually, and other ways. So that's part of my whole, in the book that you mentioned, where I tell my story. It's a personal story, memoir around bipolar and the whole story of seed systems and systems thinking, the whole thing, the kids, the stepkids, the husband. But in the end, a friend of mine said, you have to put in part 2. What do we do now? Like, if we know that we're dealing with this brain, she says to me, you're my North Star for self-care. You got to put in that part 2. So I have this thing I call PECS, which stands for physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. Build your PECS. Nice acronym to remember. I say practices for healthy brain, PECS. And guess what? They're good for anybody with a brain. You don't have to be bipolar to be served by your PECS, So I think more than ever right now, I have a spiritual teacher years ago was saying, it's going to hit the fan big time. Do your practice, right? I think more than ever right now, this is what we have to get masterful in. And I could go on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because if you think about it, something that I've become a lot more passionate about recently is just the predictability of change. We don't know what the next change is going to be. We don't know what the next challenge is going to be. We don't know what is going to cause this volatility. But if you were going to bet on something pretty certain before we're ready for it, COVID, let's say that it winds down or we get to a new place of stability with it. Before we're ready, we're going to be faced with the next challenge and the next upheaval. And to your point, it's protective for people to be thinking about how to build up those areas. I want to make sure that I got them: physical, emotional, creative, spiritual.
Spiritual, yeah, exactly.
So good. Acronyms are so good.
PECS. Remember that. I mean, it's funny because you could say intellectual, but it's not as nice of an acronym. So it really is physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual. Yes. And then it's one of my friends who read the book. She sends me a photograph of, she made in pencil her own one-page diagram with 4 columns under P, what she does under physical, what she does under emotional, what she does under creative, and what she does under spiritual. And we could go into what those are for each of us. But yeah, it's a good guideline. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, teaching resilience. Look, I have a pair of 20-year-olds. I've got 20-year-old twins. The best, right? And what are they up to? They were seniors in high school in 2020. Yeah. Who knew that their whole thing was going to get blown out of the water, right? Yeah. And then they have had to be resilient in ways that we never did, right? Yeah. Everything around COVID at that age in particular. And now, there's horrible statistics about the Surgeon General of the U.S. came out with the first ever mental health crisis in youth. Yeah. 1 in 2 are reporting incidents of anxiety and depression. So, I mean, we really need to help. Maybe we need a resilience curriculum in every college. Yeah. Really, maybe we do because this, I call it the pandemic-induced mental health tsunami, right? The university campuses can't begin. The capacity is way outstretching. The demand is way outstretching the capacity. And that's true around the country, right? So yeah, we need a resilience curriculum. Yeah. We can anticipate change. Right. A month ago, who knew that we'd have millions of refugees in Eastern Europe? Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the change in volatility is so certain that we absolutely have to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious about your story in particular. You mentioned that for 4 decades, you were maybe aware of this mind that you were living in. Yeah. But you weren't telling people. You hadn't told anyone. What was that like to live with? Maybe it felt like a secret. Maybe it felt like at times, maybe even you might not have understood completely what was happening. Can you just take us back to before you made the decision, this courageous decision that you're making now to become more public about your experience?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm really learning about it almost as we speak. People knew, my family knew, my friends knew, my husband knew, obviously. Over time, more and more friends knew, but the community that I really never came out to was professional. Am I going to tell the folks at Nike or Shell or Eileen Fisher that this is Sarah's bipolar? I don't think so. I had a huge fear of the stigma. and fear that I'd lose clients, or fear that people would judge me, or feel for my reputation, or, there's still a huge stigma around mental health. I call it mental health challenges instead of mental illness on purpose. I'm very careful about my semantics. Huge stigma around that, and huge stigma about bipolar. So I was afraid, right? But what I've learned that really surprised me, April, is that when I finally did, quote, come out with my story, and there's a lot in the book about that, my 20-year-old's then 17 said, "You got to do it, Mom.
Wow.
People aren't judging. Your generation is, ours isn't." And there's a whole story around that. And then I think I was even more convinced because of this mental health tsunami of the pandemic, like just throw a lifeline to anybody who needs it, right? But when I finally decided to do that, which is really even only like 6 months ago when I did an indie campaign for the book, for getting it out there, and I'm still nervous. And then what I found out was I got so much positive feedback. The opposite of what I thought. People saying, "Thank you so much for your courage, your vulnerability. I'm so proud of you." Or, you know what? I never told you, but same for me, or my cousin, or my brother, my aunt, my uncle, my nephew, my niece. People got to start to share their stories. And I did not know, I felt like I lost 100 pounds. I just felt so much lighter, because you don't know how much energy it takes to keep a secret down. You don't know how much of your lifeblood is taken in that. And one of the quotes I put in the book, "The disease feeds on silence. The disease feeds on shame. Shame feeds on silence, and I will not be silent anymore."
Wow.
Yeah, by Terry Chaney. And that's in the book. I quote her. And I didn't know how much shame was there with my silence. And when I let it go, and now it's like, whatever, bring it on. Ask me anything you want. Because part of the mission of this is to end the stigma. Because how much violence is the stigma causing?
Yeah. That's amazing. And, you think about, certainly the obvious there is that by you sharing your experience and your story in such a courageous, open way, and people can see, like, look how incredibly effective and successful this woman is. This is amazing. And changing people's thoughts about what, the bipolar spectrum might be. We're going to go there in a second. P.S.
Yeah.
But also, you give people this permission that something along the lines of, if she can share what is vulnerable about her, could I potentially share what is vulnerable about me? Even if it's something different, could I have some of that courage and share what's vulnerable about me? So it goes beyond just impacting people who the challenge that they face might be exactly the same or very similar to what you do. I think it gives people permission to share whatever personal, individual challenge or vulnerability they might have.
Absolutely. I hope so. And guess what? If you're out there thinking about it, you're going to just free up so much energy.
Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful. Yeah. And luckily, I'm surrounded by friends, and the people who might judge me aren't going to say it. Right. Yeah. But the feedback that I've been getting has been such a blessing. And then the reviews on the book too, just such a blessing. So I'm grateful to be able to do this. Yeah. And to have achieved at a stage in my life that I don't care as much. See a couple of silver hairs there, that I've earned. Yeah. It's just, there's some more freedom with age, but I wish I'd known to be freer about this earlier.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, for folks who might be unfamiliar, about the bipolar spectrum, the difference between bipolar disorder, bipolar II as a diagnosis, and the distinction there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is part of why I chose to write the book, is that, now I think you're a psychotherapist, so it's not fair to ask you because you're going to know the answer to this question. But I often say to people, when you hear the word bipolar, what do you think? And most people will say way up, way down, right? Big highs, big lows, right? And we think of that sort of classic manic depression. What most people don't know is there's actually a bipolar spectrum, or that bipolar exists on a spectrum all the way from that big high, big low down to unipolar, just depressed. And because most people, including, perhaps the majority of primary care physicians, aren't really aware of this distinction. So what's the problem with not knowing that? Somebody shows up at their doctor, they usually go to the primary care doc first, right? And if I show up feeling, lethargic, sad, or no affect, no libido, no desire for life, maybe even suicidal, If I show up with those, those set of symptoms, doctor will usually say, depressed, here's some Prozac, right? What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I'm asking you a question back.
Well, yeah, you end up treating something that isn't actually the case. And when I think about that individual person, invalidating that person's experience, even, I mean, to put the wrong label on that person's experience.
Yeah, I think what's for me, and I know I can't say this for everybody, but I knew it's true for a lot of people, is that for some people like me, the SSRIs, the classic unipolar depression drugs like Prozac or Zoloft or others you might know, in my case, it's like poison for my bipolar brain. So it actually made me much sicker. And that can be true for lots of folks. So the misdiagnosis can lead to misprescription, leading to the wrong medication, which can actually be wrong for your brain and make it even worse. And there's a lot more that goes with that. If you're misprescribed, the incidence of suicide is much higher in bipolar people than in regular depressed people. So if you're misdiagnosed as regular depressed, higher incidence of suicide. Goes on and on. So this also became kind of a passion for me to help raise awareness around this bipolar spectrum, because how many people knew? I mean, we know there's a sexuality spectrum. We may know there's an autism spectrum, or at least we've heard of it, even if we don't have a deep expertise in it. Most people I share this with won't have heard of a bipolar spectrum. So to raise awareness. And I wanted somebody to say, look at the book and say, okay, on page 32, Sarah says that this exists, to their doctor, can you consider it? So,
yeah. Well, and that's so important. I mean, it reminds me, after my first daughter was born, I had a bout of decently severe postpartum anxiety. And it's funny because I would go to the doctor and they would give me the depression screening questionnaire that they give all new moms at, whatever, their 6-week checkup and things after that. And I would pass that thing with flying colors. I mean, it looked like I was absolutely fine on paper, but I kept telling my doctor, I'm not depressed. I'm anxious. This is the wrong scale. And he's like, well, this is the only scale that we have. I don't know, and so if you don't have someone like you talking about what alternative names to give an experience that you're having,
right,
you might not know where to even go digging or what questions to ask that could lead in a more productive direction, because it's just not maybe the common path that provider, as good intentioned as they are, but that might not be the common path that they would see.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We talk about back in my sustainability work, we talk about mental models or lenses.
Yes.
Right. So what's the lens of that practitioner? The lens of your practitioner was, new moms can only be depressed, right? In the lens of a lot of regular docs or even psychiatrists, this person who looks depressed is depressed, not bipolar, and that's a problem. We need a different lens. So one of the doctors that I work closely with now, Dr. Jim Phelps, who's brilliant on the bipolar spectrum, says, screen for bipolarity. It's an easy 10-question test. And that's how we finally, it took me 5 psychiatrists, and 25 years to finally get my diagnosis. And that guy, it took him 10 minutes to get it right, because he had the right lens and the right set of questions, and boom, he knew what I had. And I was better in 3 months.
I can't imagine
after 25 years.
The onslaught of emotions between relief and complete frustration.
Right. Relief and fury. Absolutely. Yeah.
Talk about all the emotions at once.
Write a book.
Yeah. I'm curious, as we think about what you have learned from now supporting yourself and understanding your mind and what it means to be resilient in the face of this, individual challenge with this diagnosis. What you've learned from that might be applicable to people as we broaden out, as we think about even societal resilience and global resilience, as we face, we kind of talked earlier before and have been peppered throughout with climate change and these other large scale problems. I'm curious if you have lessons or themes that might be helpful as we think about tackling things at a broader scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Uh, what's coming to my mind is a quote from Audre Lorde, which I hope I get right, where she basically says self-care is a radical political act. I'll say it again, self-care is a radical political act, and African-American woman leader. So I think about that because in one way, as a, privileged white woman, middle-aged, middle-class lady, right? You could say, well, that's a choice of privilege to take care of yourself. But on the other hand, it's a radical political act, and, any small amount you can do. So when I'm working with younger moms who, got COVID, 3 kids at home, the husband's also working from home, they're in a tiny apartment, it's insanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's 15 minutes you can give yourself today? What's going to be the highest leverage thing that you do for yourself? Is it that brings you joy, that brings you energy? Is it get outside? Is it walk with a friend? Is it meditate? Is it yoga? Whatever, but prior, put yourself first, even though it could sound like selfish, but I think about it like, so we're all part of nature, right? I'm a natural system. You're a natural system, right? The earth is a natural system. We exist as a natural system within a natural system, right? We're going to respect the earth. We have to respect our own little home right here. And again, like if I'm off balance, so what am I doing, or my people doing to disrespect, rape, pillage, and plunder the earth? Am I doing that to myself too? Am I somehow doing violence to myself? And if I can do self-care in a gentle and loving way, which I would tell you my whole family history and tell you that wasn't easy. I still got to work at it because I have my dad's voice going, work, 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 think later.
Yeah.
He was an immigrant son and he had to do that, right? And there's good reason, but there's the downside of that. So anyway, I do think that is a radical political act and the right thing to do for the planet. Take care of ourselves and then do what we can to heal the earth, right?
It feels like such an interconnected way of thinking about self-care. When it just struck me so much when you mentioned we are part of nature. We are that cyclical part of nature that it just seemed so collective to think about our self-care as part of this broader goal of taking care of the planet and our broader ecosystem.
Yeah. We are that. Don't stop there. I mean, not the person that only wants to go meditate on a mountain, but start there, and have that be the place that you come forward with, your work to heal the world. We are ecosystem. This was adapted from Donna Markova, a teacher, coach friend of mine. God bless Donna, now 79 or 80, which is like a mindfulness or presencing practice, being out in nature and doing this first person thing. I'm seeing, I'm hearing, I'm feeling whatever you're seeing, hearing, and feeling. I adapted that. And every morning, the most that I can, I go outside and I will say, I'm seeing earth, I'm feeling earth, I'm hearing earth, I'm being earth. Okay. So rocks, trees, self, same thing, water, right? So I am earth, water, air, and fire, right? Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. And I don't want, that could sound a little something to somebody, woo-woo or something. But what I find is that it does make that connection for me between my body system and natural earth body system. I'm part, so from the inside out, from the outside in. Start.
Something you mentioned earlier that I don't want to tell you what you've learned from your own journey, but okay. I also don't want this piece of gold to get lost, because I think it's another piece that can really help people, whether it is they're taking on a large goal of, wanting to help with the climate crisis, or maybe it's even, I have goals or ways of being that I want to be for my family, or these larger goals that are important to us, like truly important to us. You mentioned that when you started telling your story and when you were open and honest about your diagnosis, that so much of that weight and extra in my form of psychology, we would call that just cognitive load. Just so much load was lifted off your mind because you spent so much energy keeping this secret and putting on the facade of a person who didn't have the diagnosis.
Right.
It makes me wonder, for every person who is listening to this and watching this right now, how much load we all carry around just in the facade. Because maybe it's not a diagnosis, maybe it's not a mental health diagnosis, but there's something. I promise you, for every person watching this, there's something. And the question that I would posit just from what you said was, how much weight and unnecessary load would be lifted off your mind if you could just tell the truth and just be who you are? How much more effective could you be in some of those broader pursuits?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the thing that was interesting is I didn't even know. I had no idea. I had no idea. All of a sudden, like this, we're only talking, what's this now, March? Really 6 months ago. Yeah. And when I was fully out, like I was mostly out, and it was the last people, like I started this thing called We the Change, which is women CEOs of B Corps. We could have a whole other hour about that, but B Corps, benefit corporations, right? And so I started a community of that, 300 CEOs. I was afraid to tell them, because they have a different image of me, right, as leading sustainability. The last people I pressed send on was to that group.
Wow.
Right? And they were like, oh, thank you so much, Sarah. I had no idea, but this is me too. And then, this is a 40-something who's got little kids. And like I said before, she's like, you're giving me permission. So I'm hoping maybe we saved her 20 years of bad neck and shoulders and other diseases, because you know better than I as a psychologist, like what's the cost of in terms of stress on the other body systems of keeping that down, of hiding, pressing, whatever. So yeah, I think tell the truth,
That's liberating. It's
so
to
tell my kids, you won't have to try to remember what you said if you tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, Sarah, for you to give us a little bit of information about where we can find out more about you, about your book, about the sustainability work that you just like give us the places that we can go to learn more about you.
April, I don't know if this is kosher. I didn't ask, but I'm going to do it anyway because I love the cover so much.
Yes,
so do it. That's my book. It's called Brainstorm by Sara Schley, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. You can get it on Amazon. Just look up Brainstorm by Sara Schley. And I don't know if my name will be there, how you spell it, Schley. You can also go to samenamesaraschley.com. And then my corporate website where I do the, consulting and coaching and stuff on organizational change systems, thinking for sustainability is called Seed Systems. So those are the places. I'd love you to buy the book, spread the word. I would really like to get on Oprah because I want to get on her book list. So if anybody out there knows Oprah or Reese Witherspoon, just let me know.
We'll see. I mean, this is a very large and growing community, so you never know.
You never know. I know. Community. You never know. And then in my tradition, it says, save one life, save the world entire. And I know that if we get that diagnosis right, we're saving some lives. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Undoubtedly. Well, this has been such a pleasure. It has been, such an interesting conversation, interweaving like both this individual side of how we support ourselves and then more of the collective and how we support the environment. And I'm just grateful to you for the courage you've had to be so open about your own experience and then the ripple effect, the massive impact that it's going to have on so many other people. So thank you so much for being with us for the summit.
Oh, April, thank you. It's been an absolute delight to talk with you. I really appreciate it.